Cheers.
Cheers. Welcome to Culture Night.
Where each week we drink fancy wine and watch movies that are some way culturally significant. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Sarah, and we are excited to be here tonight for, this is season 4, episode 8. We're getting very close to the end of our
Here we go. One more week
season.
After this.
Yes. So thank you for sticking with us through all of this. And just a quick note into podcast business, I guess, is we are getting close to season 5. So if you have a rom-com that you love, we are looking for one from every decade, from the 60s through the 2010s, I believe. So if you have a favorite, drop it in the comments, get it to us in some way.
Yeah. Instagram, something, snail mail. I don't care.
Yeah. Send us a letter. We would look forward to seeing it. So anyways, we are looking forward to season 5, but we are still in season 4. So why don't we jump into what we're drinking tonight?
Tonight we are drinking the 2019 Silver Reserve Zinfandel from Topin James
in Paso Robles, California. We did do a Zinfandel last time, so I'm excited to try another one from a different year. We did 2020 last year and Fat Boy Zinfandel last week. Different year, different style.
It says we will find this Zinfandel rich, deep, and complex. That's about as vague as you can really get, but let's check it out.
It kind of smells, well, I'll let you take a smell first and I'll say it. Smells like those sour gummy worms we have.
I was going to say tart. Was my word.
But they're not the typical sour gummy worms. I think it's a more of fruity sour gummy worms. It's a different type of candy, and that's what I'm getting. It's very smooth and then it's very tart.
Mm-hmm. I guess I'm back to the whole raisin. I think is more what I'm getting from this.
I don't know. I'm more like red fruits.
Some beet almost. Not quite as that intense, but just that kind of raisin-ish level sweetness there.
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm there. It is a lot more sour, not in a bad way, but just more sour fruits. Tart, I guess, is the right word. But
we'll let you guys know our final thoughts after the movie, as always. But now it's time to go behind the screens,
where each week we go behind the big screens of Hollywood and look into some aspect of film production or storytelling. Take it away.
So this week we are looking into what I thought was going to be the advent of surround sound or Dolby Digital for Jurassic Park. However, it's not actually the case. I feel a little bit silly now. So the technology used for Jurassic Park was actually called DTS, which was created by a company called DTS, which stood for Digital Theater Systems. And Jurassic Park was the first movie to use this new technology because Steven Spielberg had not been happy with the state-of-the-art of audio. He just thought it didn't sound good enough or wasn't great. There wasn't really any innovation happening. So a company had actually approached him, DTS, with a kind of remastering of the audio of his movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind from 1977, and just blew him away with how much better the audio could sound and sounded like when they played it to him in a theater.
That's so crazy that they could fix something like that in post. Mm-hmm. I feel like sometimes if audio is bad. It's better now, but in that time,
I think they had the benefit of it being recorded in analog, so it was they weren't losing any fidelity by they were essentially able to, like I said, remaster the same way you could remaster visual effects. So, but that is absolutely crazy. So they went forward with using that for Jurassic Park, but the year before that, Dolby Digital, who'd been working on their Dolby Digital product for the past 4 years, actually went and released Batman Returns at the end of 1992, so a little bit before Jurassic Park, and was using their new state-of-the-art audio format to get the whole 5.1 surround sound system. From what I could tell online, the real difference between them, for the most part, is that DTS uses a higher bit rate. There's just more information per second in there, that they actually used a separate audio CD for a lot of these tracks and synced it up with the footage so they could pack more into there as opposed to it being alongside the film like in the old days or just being one big file. They basically kept it separate. And they also, this was not cited, but it was from Wikipedia. It seemed like it needed some clarification there. It was that Dolby Digital uses diffusion, whereas DTS used more directional sound. And I couldn't really get a good idea of what that means. But I think...
But there was a difference.
What I kind of interpreted it to mean, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, was that Dolby Digital was using more software to try to give you the feeling of some of these things, whereas DTS was more in a controlled theater setup where they were able to not have to course correct for that with software. They were basically able to point the speakers where you were going to be and broadcast the audio that way versus trying to be able to, I guess, sound great for everyone in the whole room by using various tricks like that. So someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how I kind of interpreted it.
I'm going to trust you on this one.
So the reason I feel extra silly is because when audio is remixed for the actual home theater use anyways, DTS is rarely, if ever, used because it does generally require more sophisticated theater level hardware, hence digital theater systems. And generally what you're seeing on the TV or in your home theater is going to be Dolby Digital. They do have like various competing technologies like Dolby Atmos. It has a correlation with the DTS-X, I guess, so various things like that. But for the most part, what you're listening to at home is going to be Dolby Digital, even if the movie was made with DTS in the theater.
Gotcha. And I mean, I knew that Jurassic Park was famous for its sound. I knew nothing specific about it, but I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, it kind of required more specialized hardware, especially then. And also, it was not the advent of surround sound because the first movie to have surround sound was actually Disney's Fantasia in 1940. Came out a couple years before that.
Just a little.
Just a couple.
Almost what, 50?
53, I guess, years before that.
Yeah.
So a while before that. So anyways, I feel kind of silly, but I feel a bit more informed now about actual some of this audio technology. It is still very great having the full surround sound experience, hearing the dinosaurs, getting that full immersive experience. But it wasn't a different technology that we heard the other night than we would have heard otherwise, just because you had to have been in a theater that supported DTS back then.
That makes sense. And I mean, I feel like that's also like probably something theaters are all for. They're like, you know, we want the theater experience to be very exclusive and something that you can't fully recreate at home.
And some people have like actually found the DTS audio data and able to, I guess, download that so you could hear it for yourself on your own home theater system. But I don't know if anyone is really going to actually be able to perceive the difference unless they have some really, really sophisticated hardware anyways. And at the end of the day, I think the difference is so minimal and there's so many other factors into whether or not something sounds right that it's probably not worth the difference there. And Dolby Digital kind of brags that they are able to basically pack more for their punch. In the less data, they're able to give you the same or what they might think better experience anyways. So
interesting.
So there's that.
Well, thanks for enlightening us.
You're welcome.
I know you learned something, and I knew nothing, so I learned a lot. All right, so now it is time to go into our Slept On It segment where we go back to last week where we watched you got me on the Jurassic Park. Last week we watched Starship Troopers, forgive me. And does your rating change after sleeping on it? You rated it a 7.2 and I rated it a 3.2. You might have, but I think within the episode you bumped it up to something.
7.5.
Maybe something even higher than that. I don't remember.
No, I think it was last week on the Slept On It. I bumped my score up, but I think a 7.2 for Starship Troopers is going to be my final score for that.
Okay. Yes, I'm sticking with 3.2. I feel no different after watching it. So
that's your score. It's all subjective anyways.
Yes, and I feel good about that. And now it is time for Fact Snacks.
All right.
I almost feel like we need like a bunch of like, because it's not just one snack. It is.
Can you press it a bunch of times? What happens?
Yeah. There's a little bit of a delay.
Yeah. Fast action there.
Oh, we'll see. We'll see if we work on it or not. But for now, it works. So in Fact Snacks, we go back to some of the things that we talked about last week, find some behind the scene facts, and just, I don't dive deeply in these. They're just little bites, little snacks of information from behind the scenes. So my first fact snack is that it was originally planned as a big budget summer blockbuster, but due to some of its controversial nature, it was really scaled back. Obviously, you can tell it's not a super big budget film. But like you can tell it's not a super big budget film, but also at the same time, it's like the sets seem really big and the costumes are all like, it's not just like people wearing normal clothes. Like they had to make all those costumes that in some ways it feels like it had to be.
Definitely wasn't on the cheap. Like they didn't make it like in a, in someone's backyard or anything like that.
I read the budget in my notes or in my research, but I did not write it down. So I do not remember it off the top of my head. But on that note, I did kind of want to talk about something that I didn't talk about in the podcast last week was that I was kind of caught off with how caught off guard with how progressive some things were.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, things are not to this extreme now, but just like the co-ed showers and some of those scenes, like even just to start off with the co-ed bunks, I was like, oh, they'll sleep together. That's kind of interesting. And just, I felt really out of place, especially knowing this was from 1997, not something that was produced now, that I thought that was interesting. Did I think the shower scene and seeing everybody's bits and pieces was necessary? No. But I think it was interesting.
But also pretty regressive in other things, like how like the really intense punishment, like the lashes and breaking arms and those kind of things.
Yes. Well, so I wanted to comment on like those things were really surprising, but the controversial non-progressive stuff was the glorification of fascism and militarism. And as you will see in most of my notes are references to World War II. So that kind of takes you back out of that progressive nature. My next note is that the special effects team created over 300 computer-generated bug models to make this, which I believe, because they had all the different kinds of bugs and all the movements were different.
Sheer number of them they had in some of those battlefields, like the close-up ones, I think they were probably relying a bit on stop motion maybe and puppets and whatnot. But when they had the swarms, like they're not making that many costumes.
Yeah. And so just thinking back to the 1997 technology and just being like, whew, can only imagine what that workflow was like.
For sure.
My next note is the production design was based on Nazi architecture and the costumes were based on World War II uniforms, which I definitely got the vibe of the Nazi architecture being like the like militaristic lifestyle.
Marching and formation, all that sort of stuff.
So, I mean, I definitely noticed the uniforms and was like, oh, those feel very World War II. And then once I like really reflected on it, the whole setup definitely had some Germany vibes. And on that same note, it also borrowed heavily from German World War II era propaganda films, which I feel like was a really interesting way of telling the story. You know, like I said, didn't love the movie, but those kinds of things I thought was really cool from just like a storytelling
I don't know
standpoint.
if I saw it as like German propaganda films, but more just World War II propaganda films. I'm sure it was very much on every side, just talking about how you're the best thing ever and got to defeat the enemy and they're all evil.
What are you doing at home? And
essentially, how are you also participating in the war?
Just so interesting because obviously we did not grow up with all of that to that extreme. There's definitely propaganda in all things, but those were very explicit.
Right, and I can see why people would be kind of turned off by that if they're looking at it as glorifying it. I saw it very much as satire and like really, not in a full comedic way making fun of something, but just showing how ridiculous it was. Like I'm doing my part and all those various cuts and
the propaganda
the
definitely felt
voiceover.
like satire.
Yeah.
The lashing and all that stuff. And even just thinking about like in general, there were some really gory scenes. The Latter-day Saints base with all the half-eaten people just strewn about. And I was just not prepared for that level of, I don't even know what, like, ugh. So in some ways it was just so comical. In other ways it was like, wow, you're just really going there. I don't know, kind of weird dynamic. And then my last note, which I thought was interesting, this is a quote from the director that a summary of something that he said, was talking about how most people generally hate bugs and that made them a natural stand-in for the opponent. And usually when there are opposing sides, you're trying to dehumanize the other side, so it makes the defeating of them easier to swallow. And so by having the bugs as a stand-in for actually like another country or other people, it takes that element out of it.
It's easier to be against that thing.
So I thought that was interesting. And that way, like, bugs are unambiguously bad. So I liked that because watching the movie, I was like, I did not realize this was like a bug movie. Like, yikes, A Bug's Life. But and thinking about it from that perspective, I was like, okay, like I appreciate the use of bugs as a like device in the storytelling.
So I think I read somewhere that the writer, made it bugs also because his wife just absolutely hated bugs. And he kind of did that as kind of like did it for her essentially. But I don't know if you dug into it all, like the more behind the production and how the movie actually came to be from like its genesis essentially. So originally it was a movie written called Bug Hunt at Outpost 7.
Okay. A Bug's Life, A Boy's Life.
Right.
Ooh. You didn't know that was going to progress for here.
So we were looking for some other titles. So there actually was another title. And it originally was written without anything with Starship Troopers in mind at all. But it was basically rejected by the studios. They didn't think it was going to be worth it. And they thought it was going to be just too expensive and not really what people were looking for. So they kind of shelved it and later talking with another filmmaker, they realized that they'd both read the book Starship Troopers and saw some similarities in what he had already written and that book. So they then figured out what they could do to kind of
make a hybrid,
rewrite it essentially towards that book, which I think is, I don't think it's this movie's directly based on the book like that in that way, but that's how it ended up becoming Starship Troopers, and was able to get the studio more on board with that. And the movie was made. However, they didn't really aggressively market it because of all the propaganda and things like that. They didn't think it would be, well received. So eventually it only made, I guess, $121 million on a $110 million budget. So not much. But then later it became a huge cult classic.
Yeah, I was gonna meant to reference that. I mean, I feel like this season has been like Star Wars and E.T., these like just pop culture phenomenons. But this was like one of those more like cult classic, lesser known. If you love it, you'd love it. Otherwise, you probably haven't heard of it.
But yeah, that kind of explains a little bit more of the genesis of it.
Very interesting. So do you have any other thoughts on Starship Troopers?
I don't think so.
All right, well, let's close the door on that one, and we will move into what are we watching tonight?
Tonight we are watching The Matrix from 1999. It is rated R. So let's hop in our time machine.
Wrong slider.
Back to 1999. This is the correct year. Double checked it.
Yes.
Where the top 3 movies released that year were Star Wars Episode 1, Phantom Menace, grossing $430 million.
Yikes.
Number 2 was The Sixth Sense at $276 million, so almost, or a little over half of that, followed by Toy Story 2 at $208 million. And then down there at number 5 was The Matrix, grossing $171 million.
I figured The Matrix was close to the top. I should include it in there so we could see it. I want to go on record by saying I have seen the top 3 movies from 1999. Not very often can I say I've seen all of the top 3 movies from each year, but I have seen.
Have you also seen number 4, Austin Powers?
I've seen the top 4, and in about 2.5 hours, I will have seen the top 5 movies.
So you are a 90s kid after all.
I am.
The top 3 songs released that year were Believe by Cher, No Scrubs by TLC, and Angel of Mine by Monica. First 2 for sure bangers. Third one, I don't know maybe if I heard it, I would know it.
I think I know it. I feel like I recognize the title. I can't hear it, but I feel like once I hear it, I'll know it. But and also the top 15, 20 of 1999 songs. I was like, oh my God, I love all of these. So definitely, we were still pretty young, but one of those years where we were starting to really get into pop culture and know things.
Of our youth, essentially.
100%. No Scrubs for sure.
So have you seen this before? Apparently not.
Yes, as I've mentioned, I have not seen it, but I would like to share that. So I guess in 1999, we had just gotten our first DVD player, and I want to say we got it from Best Buy or
probably paid like $1,000 for it.
Something absurd. Wherever our Circuit City, like wherever we got it from, had this deal where you could order DVD, like you could get some DVDs with your DVD player, and The Matrix was one of the ones that we were able to get. And I remember I've seen this DVD box my whole life.
Bothered to watch it.
And well, I mean, I was 8 when this came out, and very much not my thing. And I mean, I remember the hype about it. I know there are scenes that I will recognize.
Didn't you understand like all the boys in the playground like trying to reenact the slow motion bullet scene? No?
Nah, boys weren't really on my radar. I was just they were off doing weird stuff, and
you're too busy playing Pretty Pretty Princess.
No, that was so preschool. I was busy drawing chalk houses on the blacktop.
Fair enough.
So I have not seen it. I have been excited to see it. This was definitely one of the ones when we started making this list for Culture Night that I wanted to see. So I'm not sure I'm really ready for it. I was trying to think about it earlier, and I feel like it's going to be a lot, and I'm going to have a hard time with it, but I'm excited.
Yeah, I have seen it. I've seen the whole trilogy. It used to be on like TBS or TNT or something all the time, especially in college.
I was going to say, that feels like a college thing.
And there were a couple times where we would just end up staying up until like 3:30 in the morning, inadvertently watching the whole trilogy and being like, why the hell did we watch this again?
That tracks with what I know of your college times.
That being said, when you're just sitting there like, pounding beers, watching this until 3 in the morning, you're not really grasping too much of it. So I don't really remember too much of the second and third, other than them being not that great compared to the first one for sure. So this is not one where the sequel is better.
I was going to say, I'm shocked, but another sci-fi movie that is that has
a trilogy for sure.
Trilogy.
Because Jurassic Park also had Jurassic Park 2 and 3. And then the Jurassic World then became
original Star Wars was a trilogy. Back to the Future trilogy.
Trilogies, yeah, Back to the Future trilogy. So
Crazy.
Mm-hmm. And
Starship Troopers has at least 3. One of them was made for TV, and then I feel like there was a third one.
I think there's a third one. There might be like another spinoff that wasn't like canon, but yeah. So, anyways, back to Matrix right before, or one more time before we sign off, is that I remember watching as a kid and just loving all the guns and action and whatnot. And I don't think I really appreciated the CGI for like really what it did and how revolutionary it was, because I was like, an 8-year-old boy just being like, oh yeah, guns and crazy moves and all that sort of stuff. That I want to watch this again, like this time, like with the lens of what were they doing at the various parts to really push the boundaries. I think we all know that one slow-mo like panning shot around, but other things in there that wouldn't have really been possible or practical to that point.
And I think it'll be especially meaningful having just watched, started from 1960 something that 2001: A Space Odyssey was, and to have already watched technology progress so much in these movies, because they are so reliant on special effects and visual effects and all the things. So I think we will definitely notice some stuff with that.
This one would be a bit different because it's not space themed, but
yes. And real quick, I do know that Keanu Reeves is in it. He wears those like dark black sunglasses and the long black coat. And there's the scene with the slow-mo, and that's all I know.
All right.
And there's some like zeros and ones graphics, or some of those like green numbers.
Yeah, I always thought someday I'd be able to read that. Can't. That's not how that works. But
okay.
Anyways,
with that,
let's go into the Matrix.
Cheers.
Welcome back to the Matrix. We are all in it.
Oh, man.
But you know what else is in it?
The wine scale?
Yes, it is.
Tell us what it is.
Our wine scale is a 0 to 10 scale. However, our scale is heavily weighted because all of the wines we drink on this show are very good wines. So a low score does not necessarily mean that it is not a great wine, because as I said, these wines are all great. So that being said, how would you rate this wine?
I would rate this wine, I think, a 6.
I gave it a 4.4.
I knew that you weren't going to like it as much.
It was just whatever,
Wow, you're so descriptive on your tasting notes, but your review notes are just whatever.
I mean, it didn't do much beyond what we first originally said about the wine. Didn't really build on anything.
I don't really know why I gave it a 6, because I don't really actually think it's a 6.
I was gonna say it's pretty high for you. I mean,
I do think last week's was better. I do think I kind of fudged that up, but I don't know. I was enjoying it. Also, again, last week I wasn't paying attention while I was drinking it, and I finished it and I was like, oh God, I didn't give it a score. I did enjoy last week's more, so maybe like a 5. I don't know. It was tasty. I enjoyed it. Tobin James makes some great wine. It's hard to be fussy about it.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, like a low score doesn't mean that it's not a good wine. I just kind of gave it relative to the other wines that we've had on this.
You've been raging with your wine scores lately. You've been like 8+ at least the last 2 weeks.
We've had a lot of good wines.
Aren't we so lucky?
Yeah. I mean, the wines we've had have been pretty good lately. This one was just a regular Zinfandel. I mean, I feel like the Fat Boy is just another level. Also,
I will say the ones that you've been rating 8s lately have been 2020 wines. So maybe 2020 really was our year.
Maybe. Or at least a great year for wine.
It was not a great year for a lot of things, but maybe for wine. We'll see if that holds true. So anyways, let's jump into our movie rating out of 10.
The movie, I'll go first for this one. I'm going to give it a 9.1.
I also wish you hadn't given your score yet, because I didn't really fully have one for it.
Okay, well.
I'll give it a 5.7.
5.7. Is that higher than last week?
Oh God, yeah. Last week was 3.2.
Okay.
Please, Starship Troopers was not higher than half.
I mean, I just thought that it was
I'm sorry, can you say that number again?
9.1.
9.1. Okay. So higher than Back to the Future?
Yeah, I really did like this. I thought that it is incredibly rewatchable, having watched it a whole lot of times and just stayed up way too late watching it again tonight. I find it quotable, and just all the pop culture references of various things, like the red pill, blue pill type thing, the glitch in the Matrix, a whole bunch of just things that just kind of are in my everyday life.
I was going to
nowadays.
say, I feel like so much of this season to you is like things that you actually work on in your career. And you said like pop culture, and I'm sitting here thinking like, what is he talking about? That those not in the software engineering business are probably not as in tune to this stuff as you, but
yeah. And then just like I said, quotability, rewatchability, pop culture and influence, and also just overall enjoyed it. I liked it. I thought I wouldn't enjoy it as much having seen it a bunch of times, but I still really liked watching this and just knowing the story, but then still being surprised at how great I thought the story came together in this.
It's not that I didn't enjoy it, and I'm glad you enjoyed it and that you get that joy from it. My biggest deductions are because I just felt confused a lot of the movie. And I mean, we've talked about how like when you're building a world, there's so much to understand that like when you see things the first time, it's like hard to understand. But I just felt like I was always like, I mean, like they were always running. I felt like I was always running, trying to like understand and like catch up to where they were. And like my brain was like over processing, trying to figure out what was going on.
You can watch it again tomorrow if you want.
No, thank you. I mean, we wouldn't podcast before and after, so my bedtime would probably be a little earlier, but like it was a lot to process. And I still feel like I didn't also get a lot of the answers that I was looking for as far as like what actually, like what was really going on. And just like, it was just so much to take that that's where my biggest deductions come from. That was like, it was some movies, like we talked about in Jurassic Park, like they didn't build the characters and you were just kind of like expected to fall into it. And that's kind of how I felt here too. Whereas other ones, they kind of slowly build who these characters are. And you feel like like I can relate to them. Like I want this to happen. And I just wasn't getting that from this, that like attachment to it. And I remember I give it points and above half because I remember the like, I mean, I lived the phenomenon of this. And I mean, again, we were still really little when this came out, but I remember it coming out. I remember everybody talking about it. I remember the hype around it. So I know it was a big deal and I know it's still referenced. And like, I know some things from it, even though I'd never seen it before. And
obviously your score is your score, but I feel like that shouldn't influence it as much. Like everyone being crazy about it at the time. I mean, what I think put more into it is, did I like it? But also, do I think that it influenced other things? So I think that it had more of an impact besides like, thinking backwards, more thinking. Like
I think if I hadn't seen it, or if I hadn't been around in 1999 and lived that time where people were talking about it all the time, I don't know that I would have known as much going into it as I did. That like, it's that like ripple of like, I remember the hype around it. And I remember the like excitement about and the glasses and the outfits, like you know all of that because everybody was talking about it and it was this like big thing when even though we were so small, that I don't know. I feel like that kind of ways, like when I've remembering the hype around these movies also kind of feels nostalgic in a certain sense to me.
Speaking of like being at that age when this movie came out, is then like a couple of years later being in math classes and learning about matrices and like talking about, this is a matrix.
I'm sure that hit you
like,
a little harder than me.
Being like get excited, be like, oh my God, next week in math class we're going to learn about
you're going to go into the matrix.
A matrix, and then you find out what it is, and you're like, it's just a bunch of numbers in a grid. The fuck am I supposed to do with those?
It's so disappointing.
It's way less cool. Where's Morpheus?
Did you really think you were going to find him?
I thought it'd be cooler than what it was.
Oh,
and matrices followed me all deep throughout computer science.
No, I'm sure they did.
It was just always disappointing. Anyways, let's move on.
Your life is so hard.
Yes. Let's move on to the movie description.
Yeah, tell us.
A computer hacker guy finds out he is living in a computer simulation, breaks out of the simulation, and works with a bunch of freedom fighters to try to break free of the matrix for everyone and wake everyone up and free their minds because they're all living inside of a simulation.
All right, the description according to the TV, set in 22nd century. The Matrix tells the story of a computer hacker who joins a group of underground insurgents fighting the vast and powerful computers who now rule the earth.
Same.
Honestly, pretty close.
Yeah, I think they kind of maybe plagiarized me a little bit, but like I'm not against them.
That's 100% it.
That's
why you go first.
What's the movie what you expected?
Yes and no.
Obviously, I'd already seen it, so yes.
I don't really think I knew the whole like. I knew like I knew the Matrix was something that you entered and exited. I don't really think I knew the whole like farms of human embryo like depth of it.
Did you think of it more as like something from like the inverse of what it was, where it's like you were in reality and you then entered the Matrix versus you were out of it and you then entered reality?
I think
that was
so.
the Matrix.
I think that's what I was going for.
Gotcha. I mean, I guess that makes sense, especially if you like you haven't seen the movie before. It would be totally realistic or reasonable. How well did the movie age?
I think it aged well.
Yeah.
Honestly, like the graphics were still pretty good.
Right. I was
for 1999, like pre 2000s.
I was shocked, and I think I had a note about the CGI being way better than I expected, and it holding up.
Yeah.
And
I mean, even from the start, like from the first thing, I was kind of like, I mean, I can kind of tell that this is not up to what it is now, but like it's pretty good.
I mean, in the very beginning is where they have like the shot, like where there's a 3D rotating around Trinity as she's like fighting someone in midair. And
I'm just mad you didn't make me do that for the thumbnail.
I mean, I could have just had you jump up and like I could have run around the camera and it would have worked.
I mean, I think just if me frozen in midair like that would have been pretty dope.
But well, first of all, my note was that the shot, that shot is like so unnecessary. It's just so weird. That thing, there's like there's really early on trying to flex the.
I think at least 50% of the shots were flex shots of like, oh, we can do this, like running up the wall or flipping around, or like there was so much. It was so much that it was like, wow, look what we can do. We're going to show all of it instead of just using it an appropriate amount. But I mean,
like, they did that same shot later. I think like in the train station at the end there, they had another rotating shot there, and it seemed more reasonable there. It just kind of, I think they might have just already come up with the whole technique to do it and just wanted to do it multiple times. But it just seemed unnecessary in that frame versus later. But I also wanted to make a note that it was, again, the famous like thing from a movie happening in the first like 3 minutes of a movie back to season one. We had a long streak going where the famous part of the movie was in the first couple minutes every time, but this time it was a little further in. But I think with The Matrix, you could have watched the first 5 minutes and be like, yeah, I guess I know about what I need to know about this from a pop culture.
Yeah, I mean, with the exception of like the bullet scene, which is much farther. If that had been in the first 5 minutes, then it definitely would have been like in that category. But I had forgotten about the her jumping up thing. But as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, I've seen this too. I feel like that was a lot of watching this for me. It was like like the things I'd heard of were just like kind of slowly falling into place.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those shots though, like were unheard of at the time and just blew everyone's mind, and where everyone now looks like, oh, how they did it, how did they do that, and let me build upon that and use that as source material. But I think there are a whole bunch of various scenes and shots in this movie that were just so revolutionary that now we look back and we're just imitating them, but it was very novel at the time.
I feel like something like this and some of the others that we've seen, it's like I almost want to like talk to our parents and be like, just tell me what you remember from this time, like because I mean we were obviously so young that like we didn't have the perspective to understand like what this was, that just to be like, you know, like what did you think of this when you saw it, because I feel like they'd have really interesting commentary on it.
Yeah, be interesting. I just think it was just like a next level above any of the CGI we've seen from the previous movies. Obviously, we're going further into the future, but it seemed like it was a huge step up and didn't feel nearly as cringy as I expected for being 25 years old.
I was expecting it to be kind of painful, but you're right, it was good. Could this movie be made today?
Probably. I mean, I think they would. I don't know what they would really need to change besides it like taking place in a different time period, because it does take place in 1999 and it was made in 99. I think they're still making spin-offs or sequels or something today. So
if something's successful, you might as well just like beat it to death, right?
I think also it being based on AI, I think also.
Yeah. As soon as they brought up the AI, I was like, oh, here we go. Another one.
Still very topical.
Here we go. Does the title fit the movie?
For sure.
Or I'm sorry, did they say the title of the movie?
Yes, they did, and it totally fits it.
Yes.
I don't know what else you would really have called that.
I think like done and done, yes and yes. Like
called it The Real World. And I think that might have already been taken around the time, so maybe not.
I wasn't prepared for that, but that was a good
one. Were there any actors that went on to do bigger things?
I mean, Keanu Reeves had already been in Speed.
Yeah, and what Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, things like that.
I remember I've seen Speed. Like I remember watching that in probably like middle school and being like, oh my God, this movie. And so like I knew of him from that, but like
love that movie.
We have to watch that at some point because I haven't seen it since that.
Perpetual TBS movie.
I've seen it one time, but like,
Hugo Weaving, who played Agent Smith, he went on to do bigger things in Lord of the Rings as Elrond.
God, are you going to get me to watch Lord of the Rings in this?
At some point, there's going to be a season. Lawrence Fishburne, who played Morpheus, has been in a bunch of other things.
He was also in John Wick, which was also Keanu Reeves. From my light Wikipediaing.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think you've seen John Wick.
I have not, but I know that Keanu Reeves is in it. And why do I know that he's in it? Because the Office Ladies pod talk about Keanu Reeves and John Wick all the time.
I mean, it's a fantastic movie. And I think that was the main ones.
I was expecting it to be more people that I knew than it was.
Well, John Pantoliano, I think is how you say his name, who played Cypher, the guy who like double crossed him.
Guy.
He played Agent Cosmo from The Fugitive, so another throwback to season 1, The Fugitive.
Connections.
I don't know if that was, I guess that was before this anyway, so not going on to do bigger things, but he's been in a bunch of other movies.
It was before this? I don't remember when. I don't remember dates and anything.
Yes. And he's been in a bunch of other things that you've seen. He plays kind of good like character actors like that. See, he was in Memento and a bunch of other movies. What impact do you think the movie had on pop culture? Special effects.
Yes.
And visual effects.
On movies specifically. Yes and yes. And then, I mean, I think just it's been referenced a lot. And I'll be interested to see as we keep watching other movies, like how often we hear this as a crossover reference. Beyond
just movie pop culture, but various things of like, oh, we're all living in a simulation and people saying things like that. And people need to wake up and, whatever. I think those kind of sentiments also were really, I don't know if they were introduced from this, but really heightened by this movie.
Definitely.
Finally, do you feel cultured after watching this?
Yes, I do.
I'm glad.
Finally, after 25 years. Oh my God. That's a long time. Ooh, that hurts. Yeah. Yes, I do feel cultured after watching it.
Yeah, I think it is one of those things where it introduces so many concepts that I think are just so everyday now that weren't then. Not just the special effects, but just how we kind of think of everything and AI and living in a simulation, all that sort of stuff. And that wraps up our culture questionnaire. So would you like to go first with your notes?
I would, because you went first last week. Okay, so my first note is some thick monitors. There can be, we lived in that time. We had those monitors, but like to see them, especially the aerial views of him on his computer. I mean, even just I'm sitting like where I can see our TV that is about less than an inch thick, maybe an inch exactly. And I mean, that monitor is like a foot plus deep. And that just, you forget how big they were.
See, beyond that though, I was just caught up by his desk.
It was overwhelming. There was a lot of stuff there going on.
And I feel like it was just so much of a, like, we don't know what hackers do. We're just going to put a bunch of stuff on their desk.
That's exactly what I thought.
A random second keyboard for no reason. A whole bunch of just like stuff there. But then what I thought was great was the contrast with his work desk.
So, but I also, yes, I loved all of that, especially because me and our children just went to visit you at work today. So seeing your office and seeing your computer setup, which is obviously, I mean, like your home setup is different, is almost exactly the same as your work setup. So it's different than his, but just like to see your like rounded curved monitor at work with his like
millimeter thick
giant monitor on his thing, like just all of those were just like playing in my head, which I thought was hilarious.
I am jealous of his cubicle though.
So I don't know if that's my next note, but at some point in here, one of my notes is I always wanted to work in a cubicle. I mean, which is contrasting with that from a very, very early age, I always wanted to be a teacher. So teachers don't work in cubicles, but like the idea of having a cubicle that I just was in and I could decorate it how I want. And I was just in my own little personal space. I would have just like thrived in that environment. And then I was thinking about how you don't work in a cubicle and I don't know how you work. I don't know how you work with people around you.
We had like sections like 4-person cubicles to an extent. And then when I first started working at my next job, we were in like larger, like team-based cubicles type thing, but I never had like my own personal one. But I agree. I would have loved that. And I would have not gone big into decorating it, but just the privacy and just my own space to just exist and be.
The like undiagnosed ADHD that I think I have would need the cubicle to just cut me off from other people, because just looking at your office, the open floor plan-ness of it, I don't think I could do that.
Not just that, but yesterday I'm literally sitting there at work and I hear someone behind me go, "Well, sweetie, I think you need to call 911." Oh, it's just a seizure. I think, and like, she goes on and on for like 4 or 5 minutes. I'm slacking the people next to me, and I'm like, "Are you hearing this call? Like, are your headphones on? Like, are you hearing this?" And they're like, "Yeah, this is freaking wild." And I'm like, "How am I supposed to work with this going on behind me?"
Oh my God. I mean, more power to you that you get anything done, especially after hearing that.
I think the person turned to be okay, because she was like, "Yes, it was just a seizure. Like, is he coming around?" And I'm like, "Oh my God." Yeah. So like, I would love my cubicle to not have to like just like concentrate with that going on.
I mean, I appreciate the whole, like, we're modern, we're open floor plan, but like, let's also cater to people's needs. Like, I feel like we're big in that. Like, it's 2024. Like, everybody has specific needs. And I think a lot of people need their own little personal space, especially in the tech industry. Like, you need your own little bubble.
When we're also aware of ADHD and everything. Agreed.
All right. So anyways, my next note is that club that they were in, my actual nightmare. So many people, so many like creepy people, everybody's so close, but also there's no way they were having any conversation in that club. It reminds me of that episode of How I Met Your Mother, where they're in a club and they're like mouthing, like it's silent, or like you hear some like beat in the background and they're mouthing at each other, but you can't hear what they're saying and it's all subtitles. Like, that is what that would have been. The fact that they were like, "What are we doing?" Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, "No,
whisper.
You are whispering in a club that is definitely louder than it should be."
And also like seemed pretty miserable, but he did seem like he didn't really want to go out. And what does he do? He goes out of this club to buy some like bottle of beer and stand there in a corner. Sounds like a wonderful time.
Right. Like, that scene, I was just like, get me out of there. I would have stayed home and gone to bed and gone to work on time and just been happy.
Looks so dirty. I mean, that was a recurring thing about the movie.
But this is a note a little bit down, but on that note, I have a note that says, I appreciate the color grading and the visual look of the film, like the dark and dirty, and it almost gave me like some Sin City vibes without the black and white. Like, it was that grunge, or honestly, even like Always Sunny, like where everything is just like dirty. And
for sure. Yes, very Always Sunny.
I mean, even from the first scene where they were going in, like the police were breaking into the hotel room or whatever, and just like walking down the hallway, and my first thought was, that is why I would never want to be a police officer, is you end up in these like dirty, like gross places, and that's just not for me. But then that was just kind of a theme throughout the whole movie. And although it's a real commitment and that not everywhere looks like that, like they like made that the look of the film, and I appreciated that from like a visual storytelling standpoint.
I wish they kind of given a reason why they were always in like the most like dirtiest, dungiest, dankiest places. But I could have done without that. But it also added the whole atmosphere to the movie. So there's that.
Yeah. I mean, it was something that I was able to clock and be like, oh, like they have committed to this and they're just sticking with it. And, you know, somebody made that artistic choice, and go for it. My next note is, okay, so we always talk about like, oh, if we have a remake or like a sequel or whatever. So in my 2024 remake, I would have Will Arnett as the agents, because he could have played all three of them that looked exactly the same. And Adam.
Yes.
It took me a minute. I was like, I couldn't decide whether it was him or John Hamm, and I had to look at their pictures to officially commit, but it's Will Arnett. And Adam Driver is Keanu Reeves' Neo. Especially like Adam Driver, or Keanu Reeves now with his like slightly longer hair look is like so an Adam Driver.
Yeah. I can kind of see him from like the acting and the voicing, but the whole believability as like an action type person, I wouldn't believe.
He is a very dramatic actor.
Can I blow your mind a little bit if you don't already know this? But originally, who was cast as Neo?
Oh God,
Will Smith.
I can see that.
Be a very different movie, because Will Smith, especially at that time, would have played Will Smith as Neo.
Yes, but I see it though. I can totally see it.
Yeah.
I don't know, but maybe like, what's that movie Wild Wild West that came out?
So that's why he didn't do it.
But that
wanted
was
to do
like
that instead.
similar, but obviously different. Like Wild Wild West and Matrix are different like settings, but it was still that same kind of like action, like glasses. How do I know there were glasses? Because I had some Burger King Kids Choice sunglasses.
I didn't know you were that cool.
Oh, you don't even know. We're just scratching the surface.
I had no idea.
So I think maybe that's why I think of it is because I I got this like toy in Burger King Kids meal.
No, that is a great pull. That is why he did not do the Matrix.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting. But I could see it.
It would have been such a different movie. He could have pulled it off. It would have been so different.
But I almost feel like they would need a different Morpheus. He is like, and maybe because I'm thinking of older Will Smith now, that he is so similar to that character. And that I think Keanu Reeves was a better like contrast to that. Anyways.
Yeah, I don't know who had Morpheus.
Those were my recasts if I was watching this now was Adam Driver and Will Arnett. And then I appreciate the look of the film. So he's like, you can take the blue pill or red pill. And I was like, you're offering me Dayquil or NyQuil? Like, which one do I want? I mean, I'm pretty certain those are the exact pills that I take when I am sick. And I was like, I mean, I'm tired. I'll take the NyQuil. I'll get a good night of sleep.
My first thought was he offered them, and I would be like, shit, which one's which again?
Yes, I would 100% second myself.
What, you're talking riddles. Which one does what again? I'm not confident.
And I 100% would take the one where I'd be like, I'm just like unplugging myself from this and just like, nope, not for me.
Right back to sleep.
Yep. I was like, something that sounds hard or like sleep.
That sounds like a skit from like
again, Dayquil, NyQuil.
Yeah. To be like from like the comedy films of the time, like imagine something like Scary Movie, them like remaking that scene and then being like, so you get the red pill where you can like know all these things, or the blue pill where you go right back to sleep, and then like not even hesitating, being like, yep, back to sleep.
Yep.
Let me forget this.
Yeah. Oh, love that. That would be really fun. And then my last note is the white screen.
My poor baby blue eyes.
I mean, my brown eyes were having a hard time. That I don't know how you did it with blue eyes, but when we were watching it in the dark, and we do have a rather large television, so it was really aggressive. But both of us like couldn't watch it. It was so bright. But then I'm thinking like, you go to the movies and see this, and the movie screen is huge. I mean, like we have a big TV, but like
85 inches.
The movie screen is
comparison
is like a 2-story. I don't know. It's not that big, but like it's huge.
Yeah.
That like, oh my God.
Measured more in feet than in inches. Yeah, that would have been brutal.
I mean, I don't even know what happened to that scene because I couldn't watch it.
I couldn't look directly at the TV for like 3 minutes. It was pretty intense.
And honestly, even I don't even think
because the whole movie had been so dark before that.
I also don't think I realized it switched back to like the dark because I was still so blinded and I was still kind of like half watching, trying to see what was going on. It was very intense. So just to wrap up my section is that, you know, obviously I had a lot of notes, but I think my biggest takeaway is it was hard for me to buy into the story as an audience member because I just like didn't really know what was going on the whole time. And I mean, you kind of get it towards the end, but I still needed more backstory to like really understand a lot of it. So that's my bigger takeaways. I wish I'd had a little bit more. Yeah,
watching it again, I pick up on a lot of things that I know are coming in the future, and I think they do lay some groundwork for the sequels pretty well. That I understand like why you would not know what to pick up on, what not to pick up on, and there's a lot of information. And the more you kind of understand it, you kind of see like, oh, that's where they referenced that, or that's why they said this, or that's why they did that. So,
and I mean,
they did some good
having watched lots of like sequeled stories, you pick up on those things and you understand how all of that goes together. That I'm certain that there is more to it, but just from like a first glance watching this as an adult, it's like, this is just like a lot to process, and I'm not sure what's going on.
Yeah. So on to my notes. I already talked about the first shot being unnecessary. My second note was Control X. So Neo wakes up and he's sitting there and someone starts typing on his screen, and the first thing he does is Control X, which to most people is probably cut.
Yeah, I mean, I should have made a note about that because I was like, okay, I know my keyboard shortcuts. Control X is cutting.
Now he's clearly not in Windows right there, so he would be in more of like a Unix terminal. The only thing that I can think of that would be like an exit command would be if he was using Nano, which is a text editor, and would not be my first instinct there. Control C, if I was in a some sort of terminal program there, would be actually like killing that or like Control D, Control Z. Any of those things might be more useful than what the hell he did there. And he's like hitting escape, and I'm like, escape, but then like no command. Are you think you're in Vim? Like escape :Q exclamation point. Just get the fuck out of there. I just Control X. It seemed like it was something who's like, I couldn't tell if they'd done slight research or no research at all, but Control X was not the command you're going to go for there.
Yeah. I mean, from my like Windows standpoint, I was like, I don't think that's going to do anything. And you know a lot more than me. So just to know that it didn't really go places makes me feel better.
Just not the right system call. Anyways, next note was that working in a suit. Well, my first actually, it was actually working in a suit, lol. Like, just sounds miserable.
I mean, judging by the fact that, again, we went to your office today and you were wearing jeans and a hoodie sweatshirt that said, like, nothing on it. Like, just like...
And so just some Nikes. Just whatever I'm going to be...
Jeans, hoodie, sweatshirt, and Nikes. And imagine, like, I mean, my dad wore a full suit to work every day. Yeah. And they wonder why old
software was so bad. You couldn't even concentrate to relax, to think to what you were doing. You had to be sit there and being like, God, I'm fucking itchy. I'm going to write this until this thing compiles. I don't care if it's right.
Yeah.
Things have gotten slightly better.
I mean,
you wouldn't believe it, what they have.
I will say I'm a little disappointed because you look nice in a suit. That
dry cleaning would be so annoying.
That is also true. I mean, I'm not ironing your shirts.
Mm-hmm.
You know that.
Also, I was a real stickler. Like, oh my God, you were like a little bit late, past 9 o'clock getting to this thing. I'm like, some days you just don't get there at 9. You know, great software is not written at 9 a.m. Name one piece of good software that was written at 9 o'clock in the morning. None were.
I'm so glad that you are a software engineer for this season to like give us that insight. Because I mean, my working experience is as a classroom teacher. And if you're late, like you're in trouble. So
there's no kids I have to worry about when I walk into the office at 9:08 or 10:15 or whenever I get there. You know, depends on when meetings are. But anyways, just that culture, I'm glad is not there anymore for my own sake. Next note was, so Morpheus, they call on the phone after he gets the whole whatever bug in his belly button thing, which is bizarre. Anyways, and he tells them this line is tapped, and then tells them exactly where to meet them.
Right.
And I'm like, that sounds like a terrible idea unless you're giving them some sort of like time thing where you don't think they can get there in time to intercept you. But to be like, this phone's tapped, meet us at this bridge. And you just think their agents aren't going to show up?
I thought starting the phone call off with this line is tapped seemed pretty stupid.
Yeah. Maybe give him something that like you think only he would know or something to maybe get you there, but just kind of seemed unnecessary to say this phone is tapped or like you could have given like some sort of time thing. Be like, we can't talk long because of X. But my next note was that this movie and the whole premise is like the dream or ideal of like schizophrenics, computer nerds, and conspiracy theorists.
Yes.
Like schizophrenics, you're sitting there in your office and a phone appears and you're just like talking to some voice telling you what to do. Sounds like schizophrenics. Computer nerds being like, oh, I'm a computer nerd. And suddenly I'm actually the chosen one. And I'm going to fight bullets and do all these crazy things and like fall in love with this hot chick.
Or be like Tank with like, you know, like having all the keyboards and just being in control that like I'm doing something that's really important and I got to know all the codes.
Yeah. Being savvy at computers is like the cool, like buff thing to do.
As opposed to Lex in Jurassic Park, who's like, I'm a hacker and like saves the day in the most lame way possible. Like, this is what you want.
Or Nedry, who's just like not the
just like the worst.
But then conspiracy theorists to be like, oh, there's this big conspiracy that everyone is in a suit is out to get me, and there are all these, you know, people just need to wake up and understand this. Like, you can very much see
need to be woke,
right? The whole conspiracy theorist being like, oh, I need to not trust anyone and everyone that doesn't believe me is out to get me because they haven't woken up yet. Like those kind of things is very much hard to miss in this.
You nailed those three categories right on the head for sure.
I can see why they really love this movie. My next note was that they're still using discs or some sort of like cassette thing to load programs. This is the year 2199 or something was what he said. And they're like, oh, like I understand there's probably a lot of information to teach someone all the ins and outs of Kung Fu, but just seemed kind of weird to be like, we still need CDs or not CDs, but like some disc thing to.
Especially, I mean, even just compared to like a micro SD card that we use now, like he's plugging in. It's not quite a floppy disk, but like floppy disk-esque. That
I feel like they were like CD type things there too. That the whole part when they're in the Matrix and they're using flip phones that are very 99 based. I'm like, okay, well, you're in like the Matrix using technology that's there today.
The CDs were also 1999. It was what Neo was handing out to his like weird, creepy hall friends. So that was rooted in 1999, which I can believe. And the phones also 1999, yes. But the on the ship, and I think that was also the biggest part that I didn't understand is like they're on some kind of like not like spaceship, but like they're not really in space, but like I don't know. That was
they're on Earth and they're basically going through the sewage systems. That's all that remains of these cities.
And it's what these like 6 people left that like know what's going on.
Well, the city. There's Zion, deep underground, where Tank and Dozer were like
that's right
born.
Okay.
So they're just basically out there
This is
trying
a lot.
to save the world. Yeah. You'll get it if you watch more of the sequels. My next note was the Red Woman scene with the freeze frame. There's like the bullet, and they're still like walking around moving things, and not just that, but like the technology to actually do that and have like this whole freeze thing where they're moving in and out amongst these people. But the attention to detail in Morpheus's glasses and the reflection, still having those people in like the gun held out like in the reflection while Neo is still moving and talking and seeing that reflection, I thought was like great attention to detail, but also pretty technologically impressive to have been able to put that whole scene together. It doesn't seem like much until you look back and be like, well, to have that freeze frame and have everything stop, but then have them move in and out like amongst them.
Yeah, there's so many layers to all of that. But also, can we just like talk about his glasses for just a quick second?
Morpheus's?
Yes.
There's no frames or no arms to it.
Arms, and they just especially because there is that one specific scene where you watch him actually put them on. And I just
like, is he just kind of like squinting to keep them on, like using like the eye muscles?
Is he using his
Yeah.
Is he using his eyebrows?
For those of you watching, I'm showing you how Morpheus would use his glasses. If you're not watching, you probably should see this.
If you're not watching, please tune in to Instagram because this is gonna be a reel.
It's like this, and just kind of like flex his eyebrows onto that, and you're like, I'm just gonna walk around like this for the next couple hours, guys. Like, otherwise, the sun might get me in this dark, like wet, moist room.
Ew. I was just imagining that they like glued them to his nose or something, but you're just busy imagining his eyebrows, keeping them on his face.
Called the power frown.
I'm so glad we talked about this. Okay, like, we can move on.
Everyone, like the writers, creators were like, this is the future. This is what glasses will be.
Listen.
In the future, there's no arms on sunglasses. That's the technology advancement we've made. And now you just frown all the time. Everyone's angry anyways, so it works.
I mean, what's his face? The Asian with his very angry forehead?
Hugo Weaving has a very concerned forehead.
He would have definitely kept those sunglasses on. 97,000
layers of frown there. It's crazy.
God. Okay. Sorry, we can move on now. That was so much better than I thought it was going to be.
My next note was the CGI wasn't as bad as I thought. We touched on that. When they are looking, next note was that they're looking at the screen and there's all the classic Matrix, like ones and zeros characters floating the screen. And Cypher is like, oh, there's like too much information on here. So like we just look at this and you get used to it after a while. And I'm like, there's too much information. So you're relying on like, there's like what we'll say 50 rows across and down just as an estimate. So 55 times 50, that's how many like bits of data that you might have, especially if it's ones and zeros, obviously have more characters there. But you're telling me that's more information that you would have from like our TV that has like literally 4,000 by however many thousand pixels there. And like, yeah, sure, it might not show everything, but maybe you can have like some little displays to show you if you're supposed to like, if the temperature or smells or things that you can't just visually quickly see from that. Just seem kind of silly to me.
I mean,
that here looks at ones and zeros and I suddenly can visualize this entire universe.
I mean, that whole scene was like, trigger warning, this guy is a bad guy. Mm-hmm. I was going to say something out loud, but I didn't. But I was like, I mean, like, he's definitely like in some shit here.
They don't linger on it very long. The very next scene, they're showing him like,
but I mean,
with the agent.
Pretty quickly into that scene, I was like, we're laying the groundwork for some shit here.
Yeah. I'm glad they didn't dwell on it too long before like really revealing it, because I was like, how long is the audience supposed to be like, I don't know if he's bad or not, when it was very clear.
Very clear.
Next note was that he was Agent Cosmo from The Fugitive. Next note, hacking the mainframe. They talk about hacking the mainframe of Zion. And I feel like in the 90s was just the era of we're going to hack the mainframe. No one knows what that means.
Nope.
It's just something that hackers did. You hack. What are you going to hack? You're going to hack the mainframe.
What
does that mean?
I was really hoping that you would just like pick apart the technical details of this.
Yeah. Mainframes do still exist. It's it's oddly specific thing to say you're going to hack, but I think people just thought like, oh, the mainframe, the main thing. Mainframe is more than just that or whatever the hell they think the mainframe is in movies. But I'm like, so this Zion is a city, and they're going to hack the city's mainframe. And it just didn't make any sense to me. It just seemed like they were like, we thought this whole thing through, thought it a lot. We want to have a sequel. We're afraid that they're going to, and someone's like, hack the mainframe. They're like, yep, that's what we're going to put in the script.
I mean, you have to appreciate that this is a bunch of like artsy people who are trying to make a dramatic film, trying to make a technically based film.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to get it all right.
Yeah, it just kind of seemed like they must have like tested it in front of some people, or like on the script writers wrote something more specific, and they were like, no one's gonna know what the fuck that means. We're just gonna call it hacking the mainframe, and like that's the end of it. Mm-hmm. Hacking the mainframe of a city. I don't know. Last two notes is that there wasn't really an iconic soundtrack per se for this. No. It seemed very forgettable. Didn't really get much from it.
Very generic. I can't think of it off the top of my head.
However, the very last song where they play Wake Up by Rage Against the Machine is like one of the most like iconic badass endings to a movie, according to a lot of Reddit threads that I have read in the past couple of years. I
will say I got chastised when I turned it off because it was so loud. I mean, we have the surround sound system, as you know, if you listen to our Jurassic Park episode, because we could not watch Jurassic Park until we had surround sound. So it was so loud down here. And I'm like, we have two sleeping children upstairs. Like, I just can't do this sound anymore. Great, like, and he was like, you turned it off. And I was like, I'm sorry.
It just like hits like so immediate and so well with like, he's basically giving like a call to action to everyone out there, and then just launches into Wake Up, and like just I won't try to sing it because it'll sound way less cool than the song actually sounds. But I also unfortunately feel like the whole like the fact that it's called Wake Up, that it is like the anthem of conspiracy theorists, even though conspiracy theorists hate wokeness, which they're trying to tell people.
They hate wokeness, but they like want to be woke. It's like
hate woke, love wake. I guess is the
they don't even know.
No one knows what it means. But anyways, that is The Matrix. And we have one more episode coming up next, launching a little bit more into more modern time sci-fi, just to kind of see the progression. We saw already a huge jump in the special effects there. We'll see what we get.
I feel like this will be a bigger jump. I'm excited because I feel like we really have gone really deep, like from way back all the way forward. And although I'm ready to be done with sci-fi, I'm ready for one more week of just like a little bit more, and just from like a filmmaking standpoint, I'm really interested to see how the stuff progresses.
Yeah, I think this one will be less on the cultural significance and the more well-known part, but I think it will be a good, from what I've heard, great movie and more modern sci-fi. And there's always room. We've not watched, obviously, every sci-fi movie ever in this season. There's room to revisit this.
We've only watched 8 movies.
And we get back around to it.
Yes. So if you are enjoying the podcast, if you could rate and review wherever you get your podcast. If you are following us on YouTube, if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can get notified when we post new videos. You can also follow us on Instagram at CultureNightPod, or if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, recommendations, send an email to culturenightpod@gmail.com. And stay tuned for next week to see the season finale of season 4.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my God, we made it.
We're into the 5s. We drink Tobin James 5s for every episode.
I don't think we have enough.
No.
At Tobin James, if you want to send us a couple, we will drink that.
Yes, we can make that a thing. Let us know.
All right. Well, see you next week.
Cheers.
Cheers.